force behind the science. Every little choice that's made is the bedrock where we've played. Let's go find the missing key to unlock our history. Unlock our history.
The mission here is simple. We want to give you a shortcut to understanding his massive, intimidating classics.
Right, and more importantly, to figure out how his gritty insights apply directly to the way we live today.
Exactly, because Dostoevsky wasn't just writing fiction from some comfortable ivory tower. I mean, he survived crushing poverty, a terrifying mock execution, and years in a frozen Siberian prison. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, to really get what Dostoevsky is doing in his novels, we have to recognize the external plots. You know, the murders, the gambling, the political conspiracies.
The stuff that sounds like a soap opera.
Right, exactly. All of that is nearly scaffolding. The true battlefield for him is the human conscience.
Which is fascinating.
It really is. We are going to explore his core warnings from over 150 years ago because they happen to be, well, the perfect antidote to our modern obsession with technology.
And our constant attempts to perfectly engineer society.
Yeah, exactly.
So looking through these biographical notes, there is a moment in 1849 that seems to just completely shatter his entire worldview.
Oh, absolutely.
He was arrested by the Tsarist government for reading and discussing banned utopian texts with a group of radical intellectuals, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
So walk me through what actually happened at that execution, because the details here are just staggering.
Well, the government wanted to send a serious psychological message. So they put Dostoevsky and his fellow prisoners through the entire terrifying ritual of a death sentence.
Like step by step.
Step by step. They were brought out into a public square in St. Petersburg on a freezing December morning, and they were forced to wear these white death smocks.
Oh, wow, that is grim.
Yeah, and then the first 3 prisoners were tied to the execution posts, and the firing squad actually raised and aimed their rifles.
I mean, the accounts say Dostoevsky calculated he had exactly 5 minutes left to live.
Just 5 minutes.
And in those final moments, instead of panicking, he stared at the sun glinting off a nearby church roof.
Right.
He experienced this overwhelming, profound appreciation for the mere act of existing, which he later gave that exact psychological experience to his character, Prince Mishkin, in the novel The Idiot.
Yeah, it's a brilliant scene. He is standing there, staring at that glinting light, realizing that simply drawing a breath of cold air is infinitely precious.
And then what happens?
Then, at the very last possible second, a messenger arrives with a decree from the Tsar. The execution was completely staged.
Just a psychological torture tactic.
Exactly. His sentence was commuted to 4 years of hard labor in a Siberian prison camp.
Okay, I have to challenge the psychological fallout of this, though.
Sure, go ahead.
He goes from being an educated, somewhat arrogant intellectual in society to living in absolute squalor, wearing 10-pound irons on his feet, surrounded by hardened, violent criminals.
Yeah, brutal.
So if you take a highly educated writer and lock him in a frozen camp with actual murderers, wouldn't that make him incredibly cynical? I feel like most people would just completely give up on human nature.
I mean, that is the logical assumption, right? But a massive core shift happened in his thinking.
Really?
Yeah. Before Siberia, Dostoevsky leaned into the popular intellectual idea that evil was essentially an external problem.
Meaning like society makes people bad.
Exactly. The theory was that people did bad things because of bad social conditions or lack of education. You know, fix the environment, fix the humans.
The utopian view.
Right. But in the camp, living shoulder to shoulder with killers, he realized evil is an internal human reality. It isn't just a systemic bug that can be legislated away.
But wait, he didn't just see them as irredeemable monsters, right?
Not at all. That's
Yeah.
the wild part. He observed that these same individuals who had committed brutal acts also possessed profound, deeply beautiful natures.
Well, what?
They were capable of immense tenderness, loyalty, and spiritual depth right alongside their brutality.
Wow, that is quite the paradox.
And observing this paradox completely dismantled his belief in neat, rational ideologies, the ones that try to categorize human beings into simple boxes of good and bad.
Well, if his time in Siberia destroyed his belief in purely rational human behavior, it makes perfect sense why he would write a character like Rodion Raskolnikov.
Oh, absolutely.
He is essentially the ultimate test case for living purely by logic. Let's look at Crime and Punishment.
Great example.
For someone picking it up for the first time, the premise is deeply unsettling. Raskolnikov is a desperately poor former law student who decides to murder an unscrupulous elderly pawnbroker.
But he doesn't commit the murder in a fit of rage or raw
There
desperation.
you calculate.
Yeah, he rationalizes it using cold utilitarian math. He convinces himself that because he is highly intelligent, he belongs to a special class of extraordinary men.
Like Napoleon.
Exactly like Napoleon. According to his theory, extraordinary men are exempt from ordinary moral laws if their actions serve a higher purpose or benefit humanity.
So how does she justify the pawnbroker?
He calculates that her hoarded money could be used to help dozens of promising young people. Therefore, her death is a net benefit to society.
You know, the structure of the book is brilliant because it functions almost like a psychological thriller in reverse.
How so?
Well, we know who the killer is in Act 1. We even know his motive. The real mystery of the novel is watching the mechanics of his deteriorating mind after the fact.
That is a great way to frame it.
Yeah, because he steals the money, but he doesn't spend it. He buries it under a rock, and his mind becomes this suffocating, paranoid prison.
Right, because Dostoevsky is detailing the physiological rejection of a purely rational idea.
His body rejects it.
Yes, literally. Raskolnikov's intellect told him the murder was justified, but his conscience, his soul, violently rebels. He falls into physical fevers.
Oh, I remember he faints at the police station just hearing the murder mentioned.
Exactly. He wanders the streets in a state of delirium. The body and the conscience are attacking his intellectual theory like a biological immune system fighting off a virus.
So instead of just writing a moral fable where the bad guy gets caught by the police, he's showing us that the punishment isn't the prison sentence at the end of the book.
Right.
The punishment is the immediate, unavoidable fracturing of his own psyche.
And Dostoevsky is deliberately narrowing the imaginative distance between the reader and the murderer here.
Making us relate to him.
Yeah, because we prefer to think of killers as entirely alien. But Raskolnikov believes he's a cold-blooded, rational operator, when in reality, he is quite tender-hearted.
We do see him give away his last coins to a starving family.
Exactly. Dostoevsky demonstrates a deeply uncomfortable truth. We often commit terrible acts not because we are inherently cartoonishly evil, but because we create a highly rational story in our heads.
A story that makes our cruelty sound noble, necessary, or justified.
Nailed it.
Well, when you take Raskolnikov's belief that pure logic can justify anything, and you scale it up from one student in an apartment to an entire society, you run into Dostoevsky's fierce warnings about progress and technology.
Yes, which brings us to a wildly uncomfortable voice in literature, the underground man.
From his 1864 novella, Notes from the Underground.
Right. The underground man is a bitter, hyper-intelligent, isolated former civil servant. And he spends the entire book launching a massive, chaotic attack on the prevailing deterministic philosophies of the 1860s.
Deterministic meaning what exactly in this context?
At that time, social reformers and scientists were arguing that human behavior could be mapped like physics. They believed humans were completely rational creatures, driven only by their own best self-interest.
So the prevailing theory was that if you just provided the right environment, the right economic system, and the right scientific optimization,
Yes.
then humans would naturally choose to be good and perfectly happy.
And the underground man violently rejects that. He rejects the idea that a human being is just a piano key or a mechanical cog in a social machine.
What's his counterargument?
He argues that human nature is so inherently chaotic and irrational that if you ever managed to build a perfectly engineered utopia, humans would deliberately choose pain, spite, and self-destruction over perfectly calculated happiness,
Just to prove they have free will.
just to prove they are free.
See, I struggle to buy that entirely. I mean, nobody actively wants to be miserable.
Fair point.
Are we really saying human beings are so petty they would ruin a perfectly optimized, frictionless life just to make a philosophical point about free will?
Well, consider the alternative he was arguing against. Dostoevsky was reacting to thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, whose work he actually detested.
Rousseau was the one who suggested that following our natural desires leads to harmony and peace, right?
Yes, and Dostoevsky saw that as a trap, leading to terrible servitude to our own appetites.
So how does that answer the question about ruining a frictionless life?
Dostoevsky's argument is that if you eliminate all basic friction, say, you cure starvation, eliminate physical danger, and provide endless comfort, human beings will immediately invent a new way to suffer.
Oh, yeah, actually we see that everywhere today.
We do, don't we?
We have apps that optimize our sleep, algorithms that curate our entertainment, and smart homes that anticipate our temperature preferences.
We've removed so much physical friction.
And exactly. Yet we are dealing with unprecedented levels of status anxiety, extreme boredom, and existential dread.
Because reason alone cannot heal the human heart.
It's just not enough.
No, it's not. Dostoevsky warned that when intellectual pride is detached from moral conscience, it mutates into cruelty.
So when a society prioritizes efficiency or optimization over human dignity,
And the messy reality of free will.
right, it inherently becomes tyrannical even if it claims to be acting for our own good.
Exactly.
That sets up a terrifying dilemma, though.
It does.
Because if engineering a perfect society turns us into robotic piano keys, but living with absolute freedom means we have the capacity to act like monsters, what is the alternative? How do we navigate that?
Well, Dostoevsky tackles this head-on in his masterwork, The Brothers Karamazov.
Okay, let's get into that.
Within that massive novel, there is a chapter called The Grand Inquisitor. It is a story within a story told by one brother to another, and it stands as one of the most brilliant explorations of freedom and authority ever written.
The setup for the story is incredible. It imagines that Christ actually returns to Earth.
But not how you'd expect.
Right, he doesn't return in glory at the end of time. He shows up in 16th century Seville, Spain, right at the height of the Spanish Inquisition.
Walking the streets quietly.
He performs miracles, the crowds recognize him, and then the church immediately arrests him.
Yeah, and in the dead of night, the Grand Inquisitor, this old, powerful cardinal, visits Christ in his dark prison cell to interrogate him.
And what does he say?
The Inquisitor informs Christ that the church cannot allow him to interfere with their work. He claims Christ is a profound threat to social stability.
The Inquisitor's argument completely flips the script.
Oh, absolutely.
He points back to the biblical story of Christ being tempted in the desert by the devil.
Right, where the devil offered Christ three things.
The power to turn stones into bread, the power to perform miracles to secure absolute obedience, and the power to rule all the kingdoms of the world.
And Christ refused all three.
Because he wanted humans to freely choose to love him without coercion. But the Inquisitor says that this gift of absolute freedom was a massive mistake.
Yes, the Inquisitor argues that humanity is too weak, too rebellious, and too frightened to handle true freedom.
Because freedom is painful.
Exactly. Freedom requires the agony of choice and the heavy burden of moral responsibility.
So what does the Inquisitor say people actually want?
He claims that what people genuinely crave is bread, miracles, and authority. They want the security of being told exactly what to do.
Wow.
So the church, according to the Inquisitor, has stepped in to fix Christ's work. They have taken away the unbearable burden of freedom and replaced it with guaranteed comfort and strict, unwavering rules.
Okay, but when an author writes these intense religious and philosophical debates, it's so easy for the scene to turn into a thin mouthpiece for their own religious beliefs.
That goes a lot, yeah.
It usually feels like propaganda where the author's preferred side easily wins. Is Dostoevsky just rigging the debate here?
No, not at all. And that is what makes Dostoevsky a master. He uses a literary concept called polyphony.
Polyphony.
Yeah, it means multiple voices. He writes his novels like a courtroom where every single lawyer is a genius, even the ones defending the wrong side.
That sounds incredibly difficult to write.
It is. He grants his characters multiple, fiercely independent voices. He never moralizes or makes the unbelievers look foolish. In fact, the character who tells the story of the Grand Inquisitor is Ivan Karamazov, the fiercely intellectual atheist brother.
And Ivan's argument against God is devastating.
It really is.
He doesn't just rely on scientific skepticism. He points to the documented horrific suffering of innocent children and tells his brother that if this meaningless suffering is the necessary price of admission to God's divine harmony,
He is respectfully returning his ticket.
yeah, returning his ticket.
Dostoevsky makes unbelief emotionally serious and intellectually formidable. He gives the opposition the strongest possible arguments.
So how does Christ respond to the Grand Inquisitor's long, brilliant, calculating speech about controlling humanity?
He remains completely silent.
Really, just silence.
He listens deeply, and at the end of the interrogation, he simply steps forward and gently kisses the old, bloodless lips of the Inquisitor.
That silence is incredible. It's a total refusal to engage on the level of cold, calculating logic.
Exactly. Because you cannot logic someone out of a purely closed logical system.
That makes a lot of sense.
The Inquisitor represents any system, whether it is political, technological, or religious, that promises to cure our anxiety by confiscating our freedom.
And the kiss.
Christ's silent kiss is an act of radical, irrational love that transcends the Inquisitor's utilitarian math.
Leaving us with a huge question.
Yes, it leaves us with the central question of Dostoevsky's work.
Oh.
Are we willing to trade our messy, painful, risky freedom for the comfort of a cage, even if that cage is highly optimized and keeps us perfectly safe?
So what does this all mean? Choosing freedom over the cage leaves us with a massive burden. Because if we keep our freedom, Dostoevsky guarantees that we are going to make terrible mistakes.
We definitely will.
We will act irrationally, we will inflict pain on others, and we will suffer. So if we are trapped as these flawed creatures in a painful world, how do we actually find redemption?
For Dostoevsky, redemption is absolutely possible, but it is never cheap or easy.
It's not a quick fix.
No, it does not come from a 5-step life hack or a new government policy. To understand the mechanism of his redemption, look back at Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment.
Okay. When his mental prison becomes utterly unbearable.
Right. He confesses to Sonia. Sonia is a deeply faithful young woman who was forced into prostitution to feed her starving family.
So she has suffered immensely.
She has, yet she hasn't lost her soul.
And when he confesses, Sonia doesn't offer him a philosophical lecture or tell him it wasn't his fault, right?
No, she tells him that to find life again, he has to literally go to the crossroads of the city, bow down, kiss the earth that he defiled with his violence, and loudly confess to the world that he's a murderer.
So redemption requires the active public acceptance of suffering.
Exactly. He cannot think his way out of guilt. He has to physically and spiritually surrender.
We see the same underlying principle in the Brothers Karamazov, don't we? Through the teachings of Father Zosima.
Yes, definitely. Zosima identifies the core disease of modern life as terrible individualism.
Meaning what?
Well, society trains us to rely entirely on ourselves, to accumulate wealth, to build walls, and to achieve total self-sufficiency.
Which sounds a lot like the American dream, honestly.
It does, but Zosima argues that this drive for independence just leads to deep, unnatural isolation. True freedom only arrives when we recognize that we are all responsible to all and for all.
The idea that we are fundamentally entangled with everyone else's flaws and suffering is wildly contrary to how we live today.
Oh, completely contrary.
We rely so heavily on tools that help us optimize our individual lives, curate our digital feeds, and distance ourselves from anything uncomfortable.
We really do.
How does this 19th century Russian philosophy map onto our modern pursuit of happiness?
Well, modern culture places immense pressure on us to constantly perform an upbeat, perfectly curated existence.
The Instagram version of life.
Right. We are subtly taught that sadness is just a chemical glitch to be medicated or a lifestyle error to be optimized away.
But Dostoevsky disagrees.
Strongly. Dostoevsky provides a deeply compassionate, if heavy, alternative to that exhausting rat race. He asserts that life is, and always will be, full of friction and suffering.
You cannot optimize the human soul.
Exactly. But by stopping the attempt to be perfect, by fully accepting our own unreasonableness, and by embracing our mutual vulnerability, we open the only actual door to genuine love and real connection.
Wow. It is a remarkable journey. We have traced the trauma of a young writer calculating his final 5 minutes in front of a firing squad, watched that trauma birth the suffocating mental prison of a rational murderer, and unpack the terrifying realization that human freedom is messy, irrational, but absolutely vital.
It is a profound legacy.
It really is. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought drawn from Dostoevsky's own life. While traveling in Switzerland, he viewed a painting by Hans Holbein the Younger called The Body of the Dead Christ in the Tomb.
That is famously a very disturbing painting.
Yes, and Dostoevsky wrote extensively about it in The Idiot. The painting does not depict a peaceful, glowing, divine figure resting on a slab. It shows a genuinely decaying, bruised, emaciated body.
It forces the viewer to confront the ugly biological reality of death.
But that painting fascinated Dostoevsky because it proved a core tenet of his philosophy. To actually save humanity, the divine had to become fully human.
It had to experience the absolute worst of it.
Right. It had to become absolutely vulnerable to decay, to pain, and to ugliness. So here is a thought for you to take with you. In our modern world, we use technology and social media to constantly curate flawless, immortal, digital versions of ourselves.
We filter out all the decay.
We filter out the decay, we hide the bad moods, and we bury the failures. We try to present a perfectly optimized facade. But what if Dostoevsky is right?
It's a great question.
What if true meaning, true redemption, and genuine human connection can only be found by dropping the filters and letting the world see your absolute vulnerability and your flaws? It turns out you can't just engineer a perfect, frictionless smart house for the human soul.
No, you really can't.
You have to live in the messy, unpredictable, drafts and all reality of it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the algorithms and keep exploring the depths of your own ideas.